Hello, I'm Hannah, and this is Hannah's Books. At the beginning of October, just a few weeks after I started my BookTube channel, Shawn the Book Maniac tagged me for his E is for Ending tag with its thoughtful questions. I put it aside, thinking I would do it as soon as I got the hang of filming and uploading, etc. Since Shawn has already tagged me in the new Vlogmas tag, which he put together with Britta, I'll link them below, I thought I should finally get this earlier tag done. So, here goes. The first prompt is E is for Ending. Talk about a book with a great one, and a book with one that disappoints. I suspect my answers to both questions will be quite unpopular. For the first one, the great one, I may be cheating. In the United States, the book Little Women is usually published as one novel, with 2 parts. But in the UK, the 2 parts are apparently usually published separately. I'm going to choose the end of that first book. I admit that when I was a young girl and read Little Women for the first time, I was devastated by the particular way Alcott ends the first part. But as I grew up, I really came to appreciate Alcott's decision to restructure the marriage plot, so common in fiction written during the 19th century. By the end of the second book, Alcott backed away a bit from the bravery that she showed in constructing the ending in that first book. But in the first, she's attempting to do something that seems remarkably modern to me. As for the ending I dislike, I'm going to name the end of Harry Potter. What I disliked was both the way the entire series resolved, as well as the specific final pages of Book 7. Let me make it clear that I love these books. My spouse David and I read every book aloud to each other, even before we were reading them to our son. We started each book the evening it was released in the United States. After we finished, we would spend months and months waiting for the next book, always trying to figure out where the plot was going. We occasionally predicted some of the course of events, to a degree, but we were always blown away when we actually saw what Rowling herself came up with. The joy in seeing the author's literary magic was not true for me at the end. I had a whole ending to the series plotted out in my head, and honestly, I liked my ending better, and I still think there's textual evidence for the way I planned it. No, I won't spill my version in this video. I also disliked the last few pages of Book 7. Not the storyline, but the writing itself, which I believe Rowling said she wrote right at the beginning of the first Harry Potter book. I suspect it would have made perfect sense when she wrote it, when her characters and themes and language were all meant for young readers. But the words felt wrong to me, coming after the more sophisticated style of the 7th book. Still, Harry Potter is one of the writers of books that I most love, just not the ending. The next prompt is E is for Elderly, a favorite or memorable elderly character. A character that has almost haunted me over the years is Phoenix Jackson, the elderly African-American woman who is the main character of Eudora Welty's short story, A Worn Path. I don't quite understand what makes this story so successful, nor why the character is quite so memorable. At its most basic level, the story is about Phoenix Jackson's walk from her home in rural Mississippi to a nearby town during the Great Depression to acquire medicine for her grandson who was suffering from the long-term effects of swallowing lye. On a larger level, the story is a quiet exploration of how a person facing great odds and great suffering carves out a way to survive with love and imagination intact. Although readers might think that a white Southern author writing in the early 1940s might just rely on stereotypes when painting a portrait like this, Welty created an elderly black woman who is strong and resistant in the face of the deep racism she has endured throughout her life. She is fiercely committed to doing what she needs to do for the family she loves. As Phoenix Jackson goes on her odyssey to the town, she faces obstacles large and small, which she faces with equanimity, and sometimes interprets through the lens of memories, daydreams, dementia. We learn that this woman makes her long journey to the pharmacist regularly, despite its difficulties, because of her love for her grandson, a love which gives her the strength and perseverance to rise again and again, like the phoenix she is. E is for EU, your favorite contemporary writer, post-World War II to now, from the European Union. I am not sure I've read more than one book by any contemporary European writers other than Jeanette Winterson. I've mentioned her on this channel before. Back in the late 1980s, I fell in love with her short books, Sexing the Cherry and The Passion. Her works over the years have not always been a huge hit with me, but even when they don't become favorites, they always fascinate me. When Winterson chose to rewrite Shakespeare's The Winter's Tale, my favorite Shakespeare play, and hers, I was ecstatic. I have a wild personal story about my connection with her novel Written on the Body, which I promised to tell, perhaps in February. That book, in which Winterson has a main character whose gender is never given, reminds me of Toni Morrison's Paradise, where race is not assigned to many characters. Morrison asks us to consider what the meaning of the social construction of race is, and Winterson asks us to consider the meaning of the social construction of gender. Both of these authors are important to me, and the similarities between their questions fascinate me. Finally, I'm very much looking forward to reading Winterson's new Frankenstein at some point, and in fact, just picked it up from the library after it did its slow climb through the whole list. E is for E, a writer you'd recommend whose first or last name begins with E. One of my favorite E writers is Eudora Welty. Since I've already mentioned her, and since Brian at Bookish used her for his E author, I'll choose another one, Edith Wharton. Although I absolutely hated her slim Ethan Frome back when I read it as a teenager, a couple of years ago I read Age of Innocence and House of Mirth, both of which I really loved. I think I might especially recommend her novels to those of you who love Victorian fiction. While she's writing from a different place and a slightly different time, her work seems like a nice way to bridge the difference. And I promise to try Ethan Frome again sometime soon. I suspect it's just not a perfect book for a teenage girl. E is for exploration, a new writer, theme, or genre you'd like to try. I have two. Last month I read George Eliot for the first time and loved her Adam Bede. This month I'm planning to read Silas Marner, and I'm planning to read more of her works in the coming year. Another exploration I want to undertake in the coming year is reading Toni Morrison in chronological order. She is definitely not a new-to-me author, but I haven't read all of her books, and those I have read are ready for a reread. I'm looking forward to seeing how she grows as a writer over time, since she had a tradition of sitting with each of her works for a long time, so her books did not emerge quickly. So, exploration, although not completely new to me writers. Next, E is for Et tu Brute, a book about betrayal. For this prompt, since it makes reference to Shakespeare, I'll choose Shakespeare's The Winter's Tale. I mentioned it earlier when I was talking about Jeanette Winterson, and I've made a whole video on it as well, which I'll link to below. The betrayal in Shakespeare's play is not the most obvious. That is, the real betrayal is when the husband distrusts and discards his wife because he believes she betrayed him. We see other versions of the same kind of betrayal in Shakespeare, in Othello, of course, and also in his comedy Much Ado About Nothing. Hero is discarded because her soon-to-be husband fears that he has been betrayed. What intrigues me most about this plotline is how easy it is for one betrayal, or a suspicion of betrayal, to set up a whole new level of betrayal. The one who feels he's been abused turns around and exerts power by becoming an abuser. The next prompt is E is for exception, A book you loved or really liked in spite of it containing what you almost always consider a fatal flaw. Homer's Iliad. The flaw for me is that it's overwhelmingly male-centric book and a book about war, but I found it amazingly moving. I'm thinking about reading another translation at some point soon, so you may be seeing a couple of Iliad videos from me in the coming months. And of course, I'll be pairing it with some of the contemporary retellings that have come out in the last few years. E is for E, a book title with lots of E's. While my choice only has 6 E's, it does have a very high percentage of E's. In fact, almost half the letters in the title are E. The We Free Men by Terry Pratchett. My family listened to the audiobook together on a long car trip after picking up our then young son from summer camp one year, where he had been for 3 weeks. Although I remember the listening experience vividly, I have almost no memory of the actual story, unlike the book in the next category, which is E is for Ever Present, a book you read a long time ago that has really stuck with you. Jane Eyre is a character whose last name begins, of course, with E, and has been my companion and sometimes my mirror in good and bad ways since I was 12 or 13 years old. If you have watched more than, say, 2 of my videos, I'm sure you have heard me talk about Jane Eyre already, so I won't do more of it here. The last prompt is E is for Eliminate, a group of books you got rid of, or want to, and why. When I moved out of my university office, I finally rid my shelves of a large collection of academic history books published in the 1970s, which one of my colleagues gave me when he retired. Now that my son is a junior in college, I need to rid my shelves of many of the books my son and I used as we homeschooled, which we did from the beginning of his education until he graduated from high school. The time has come. I need to make room on my shelves so I can stop piling up books on the floor. And the final E is for everyone. Tag extensively. Done. You're all tagged. Thank you so much, Shawn, for this tag and your other creative tags, as well as the generous and welcoming spirit you embody all over BookTube. And thank you all for joining me today. See you soon on Hannah's Books.